The 12:11 a.m. email arrived without warning, and within minutes it had rewritten the entire final day of the Rocket Classic. A schedule change of this kind is never issued lightly, and the PGA Tour does not send communications at that hour unless something significant is unfolding. Storms were bearing down on Detroit Golf Club. A 24-year-old was sitting atop the leaderboard, and this was set to be the final edition of the tournament under its current sponsor. Before diving into what caused that midnight announcement, it's worth understanding exactly how chaotic and record-breaking the third round had already been. Davis Riley shot a third-round 63, closing his round with back-to-back birdies on the 17th and 18th holes, statistically two of the hardest holes on the course all week. His round included a 54-foot putt that dropped for birdie, a shot that immediately became one of the highlights of moving day. Riley described his position heading into the final round in direct terms, saying he was excited for the opportunity. That 63 pushed him to the top of the leaderboard, setting up a Sunday chase that several other players were determined to make difficult. Riley's round was built on consistency rather than one hot stretch. He did not make a single bogey across all 18 holes, a detail that separated his round from several other low scores posted that same afternoon, where dropped shots were mixed in among the birdies. Michael Brennan, playing alongside his childhood idol Rickie Fowler, shot a third-round 64 to move into solo second place. Brennan nearly aced the par 3 13th hole with a wedge shot that settled inches from the cup, one of the closest calls of the tournament without actually finding the hole. He did bogey the 18th, the only blemish on an otherwise pristine round. Brennan's presence atop the leaderboard carries additional weight given his background. He won on the PGA Tour Americas in Windsor, Ontario, a city located directly across the river from Detroit, meaning he already had a fanbase familiar with him before this week began. That regional connection has translated into visible gallery support throughout the week, with spectators who watched him compete on the developmental circuit now following his march up a PGA Tour leaderboard just a short drive from where he first built a following. Rasmus Hojgaard authored the round of the tournament, firing a third-round 61 after making the cut right on the number. His round featured 9 birdies and 0 bogeys, and he narrowly missed matching the lowest score in tournament history, finishing 1 inch away from a putt on the 18th that would have given him a 60. In a rare sibling storyline, his twin brother Nikolai Hojgaard played a parallel round that mirrored his in the opening 9 holes. Nikolai went 8 under on his front 9, before a back 9 collapse erased most of those gains. The contrast between the two brothers' rounds became one of the more closely followed subplots of the day, as both were paired in different groups but were being tracked simultaneously by fans aware of the family connection. The 61 shot by Hojgaard requires context most casual viewers miss. Detroit Golf Club was originally a par 72 layout, but for tournament play it has been converted to a par 70. That means a score of 61 translates to 9 under par, not 11 under, since 2 par 5s were reclassified as par 4s for the event. This conversion explains why 3 different players have now tied the same tournament course record on 3 consecutive days. Peter Malnati, Cameron Young, and Rasmus Hojgaard each carded matching low rounds under the adjusted par system, a stretch of scoring rarely seen across a single tournament week. The repetition of the same record score on 3 separate days, by 3 separate players, has made the course record conversation one of the more discussed statistical quirks of this year's event, since it raises the question of whether the par 70 setup is simply yielding to low scores more easily than in past years. Not every contender rode the hot weather and soft conditions to a low score. Ryan Cantlay, Cameron Young, Patrick Fishburn, Peter Malnati, Jordan Spieth, J.J. Spawn, and Tony Finau all posted rounds of even par or worse on moving day, a stark contrast to the record-setting rounds happening elsewhere on the course. Their stumbles, combined with the surge from Riley, Brennan, and Hojgaard, compressed the leaderboard dramatically. By the end of Saturday's play, 17 players were within 5 shots of the lead, an unusually tight cluster heading into a final round already threatened by weather. That density on the leaderboard means even a modest final round score in the mid-60s could be enough to climb several spots, while a single dropped shot early in the round could just as easily push a contender out of realistic contention altogether. The full leaderboard picture entering Sunday showed Davis Riley at 15 under, holding a one-shot lead over Michael Brennan at 14 under. A tied for third group sat at 12 under, crowded with recognizable names and compelling storylines. Rickie Fowler, who won this event back in 2023, was in the mix again, adding a redemption narrative to his week. Cameron Young, ranked as high as world number 3 and a runner-up at a prior Open Championship, lurked just outside the top 2. Kirk, who lost in a playoff at this same event the previous year, was chasing his own unfinished business. Xander Schauffele was making his first career start at Detroit Golf Club, while Cantlay was using the week to bolster his case for a President's Cup roster spot. Adding a lighter storyline, Sung Jae Im and Si-Woo Kim had shared an anecdote earlier in the week about a Border Patrol incident during their travel to the tournament, a detail that circulated among fans following the group. With so many recognizable names packed within a few shots of the lead, the final round carried the potential for significant leaderboard movement even before the weather forecast entered the equation. The betting markets produced an anomaly that caught the attention of odds makers and viewers alike. Despite trailing by one shot, Michael Brennan was installed as the betting favorite over tournament leader Davis Riley heading into the final round. This inversion, the second-place player favored over the leader, is uncommon in golf betting markets, where the 54-hole leader typically holds the shortest odds by default. The gap in odds reflected differing assessments of each player's recent form and finishing strength, though it left many fans questioning the logic and debating which player deserved to be favored. The discrepancy also fueled discussion among viewers over whether recent finishing history, rather than the current tournament alone, was weighing more heavily on the odds makers' calculations than the actual one-shot deficit on the leaderboard suggested it should. That brings the story back to the 12:11 a.m. notification. The PGA Tour announced a full schedule overhaul for the final round, moving up tee time significantly and sending players off in threesomes from both the first and 10th tees simultaneously, rather than the traditional single-tee, twosome format. The change was designed to compress the final round and get as many holes completed as possible before severe weather was projected to arrive in the Detroit area. Under the revised plan, the tournament's broadcast and final groups were projected to finish several hours earlier than the originally scheduled window, assuming no delays occurred during the round itself. This restructuring also meant that the traditional drama of a single final pairing walking up the 18th together was replaced by multiple groups finishing in overlapping windows across both nines, changing how fans and broadcasters would be able to track the closing holes of the tournament. The forecasts driving this decision were not unanimous. The PGA Tour's own meteorological team presented a worst-case scenario involving significant thunderstorm activity capable of forcing a lengthy suspension of play. Local Detroit television meteorologists, however, offered a milder outlook, suggesting the storm cells could track slightly north or south of the golf course and spare the tournament from the most severe conditions. This split in forecasting added uncertainty to an already tense final round, with tournament officials choosing to plan for the worst rather than assume the more favorable local forecast would hold. Should storms arrive as the tour's meteorologists projected, several contingency protocols were prepared. Lightning in the vicinity would trigger an immediate suspension of play, with players and fans directed to shelter. If rain fell heavily enough to leave standing water or significant course damage, officials could invoke preferred lies, allowing players to move their ball without penalty in the fairway. In the most extreme scenario, the tournament could be forced to a Monday finish, something that has never happened in the history of the Rocket Classic. Beyond the disruption to scheduling, rain would also alter the competitive dynamics of the course itself. Soft, rain-affected greens hold spin far more effectively than firm, dry surfaces, which rewards players with strong iron and wedge control while reducing the advantage typically held by the longest hitters in the field, who rely on distance to overcome firmer conditions. A softer course would also likely produce more scoring opportunities on the par 5s, since approach shots would hold on the green rather than releasing toward the back edge, potentially opening the door for a late charge from someone further down the leaderboard than the current top two. Beyond the immediate drama of the leaderboard and weather, this week's results carried direct consequences for the FedEx Cup playoff bubble. Tony Finau entered the week needing a strong finish to solidify his playoff positioning, and his even-par Saturday round did little to ease that pressure. Brooks Koepka was not in the field, having withdrawn, and his situation was further complicated by eligibility questions tied to his status as a LIV golf player competing for FedEx Cup points. Jason Day, playing through a back injury, faced the added stakes of protecting a personal playoff qualification streak that dates back several years, a streak now in jeopardy given his position in the standings. Patrick Fishburn, one of the players who posted an even par or worse round on Saturday, saw his own playoff positioning slide as a direct result. With some players withdrawing or missing the cut, alternates including Max Homa Silverman and David Springer were brought into the field as replacements, filling out the roster for the final rounds. For several of these players, this week represents one of the last realistic opportunities to move their standing before the playoff field is finalized, adding weight to rounds that might otherwise have gone unnoticed outside the top of the leaderboard. Perhaps the most significant storyline of the week has nothing to do with the leaderboard at all. This is the final Rocket Classic under its current sponsorship arrangement. Rocket Companies has declined its option to continue as title sponsor beyond the 2026 event, ending a partnership that has lasted 13 years. Multiple factors were cited for the decision, including scheduling changes within the PGA Tour's calendar, the introduction of a two-tier tournament structure that has affected field strength and attendance at certain events, and ongoing struggles to maintain strong attendance figures at Detroit Golf Club in recent years. The PGA Tour has already announced its replacement plans, with a new event slated for Napa in 2027, followed by an event at a venue that has not yet been named for 2028. The irony of this sponsorship ending now is difficult to overlook. This year's tournament field is being described as the strongest in the event's history, featuring multiple top 10 world-ranked players and a leaderboard packed with major champions and rising stars. The course itself recently underwent a $16.1 million renovation, which included reworking of the bunkers, rebuilding the greens, and a broader restoration project aimed at returning the layout closer to its original Donald Ross design, the legendary architect who first designed Detroit Golf Club in the early 20th century. That renovation was completed with the specific intention of preserving the classic strategic elements of Ross's original bunkering scheme while modernizing the turf and drainage systems underneath, a combination intended to keep the course relevant for tournament play well beyond this particular sponsorship cycle. Players have spoken positively about the state of the course following the renovation. Rickie Fowler and Tony Finau, both past contenders at this event, offered supportive comments about the upgraded conditions and the overall quality of this year's field, even as the tournament's sponsorship future remains uncertain beyond this season. The event's champions list reflects its recent history, with winners since the tournament's founding including a mix of established stars and surprise first-time winners, underscoring how the Rocket Classic has produced varied storylines since its inception. This year's final round adds another chapter to that list, regardless of whether the leader holds on or a challenger emerges from the crowded pack chasing him. With 17 players within 5 shots of Davis Riley's lead, whether threatening to disrupt play, and the tournament sponsorship ending on a note of its strongest ever field, the final round carries stakes well beyond a single trophy. As for how it plays out, Davis Riley enters as the player to beat, holding a one-shot cushion built on a third-round 63 and steady ball striking throughout the week. That said, Michael Brennan's fearless play, particularly his willingness to attack pins, as shown by his near ace on the 13th, makes him a legitimate threat to overtake the lead, a view apparently shared by oddsmakers who installed him as the favorite despite trailing. Cameron Young, given his track record on major championship stages and his position within striking distance, remains a name to watch throughout the final round as well. The tournament closes with a fitting question for an event ending its current era: will a first-time winner emerge from the crowded leaderboard, or will Rickie Fowler close the loop on his own history at this course, having already won here once before in 2023?